But when a big portion of your society is saying they don't want to have children because they don't want to bring them into this world, well then there's a problem with that. And maybe we should start to try to do some things to change it. I don't know. Maybe that's just a crazy thought. But when the world is so ugly out there that people don't want to have children, the most beautiful thing that you can ever experience in this life, when they don't want to experience that because of it doesn't outweigh the ugliness, well then we are in a bad, bad place. So whether you believe in the God of the Bible or the God of some other book, or whether you just believe in a higher power, you believe in creationism instead of, random evolution, and you think that, it was some higher force that led to this reality, this creation that we're all a part of. Well, then you would also agree that part of that creation, a fundamental, foundational aspect of that creation, is procreation. Even if we didn't have the words of these books, it would be obvious to us because that higher power, that God, put a brain inside our head, and that brain tells us that based on our surroundings and the environment that we're in, that we are intended to procreate. It's a part of life. It is the main part of life. And through sexual instinct and all these different things that are instinctive, we know that that is what was intended for humanity, to procreate and to multiply in numbers, like big numbers. But there's something that's happening today amongst these younger generations that I think is something we better start having conversations about, because it's a pretty big topic and a very concerning one, to say the least. Because there are many, and I mean many, within those younger generations that are saying something that's very troubling but common in their age group. And that is that they don't want to have children because they don't want to bring children into this world. And that's because they have eyes to see when they look out in this world that it's an ugly world. Not the world itself, not the natural aspects of it, because there is nothing but beauty and majesty to be seen in that. No, it's the societal world. It's the synthetic world. The world that we create. It's that world that they see as ugly. And I cannot agree with them more. And it's because of that they don't want to bring something as beautiful as a new life into something as ugly as that world. And that should be troubling for all of us. I'm a parent. I have children. I someday would love to have grandchildren. But if they choose not to because of that, can't say I blame them. And actually, if I'm being honest, I'm a Gen Xer. Like right at the bottom of Gen X. Just caught that age group. But I'm a part of that, and I also had them same feelings. Not with my first child, but once I got a little bit older, my second child and third child, I really wasn't sure if I wanted any part of it, because I was concerned about what I was seeing in the world, because at that point, I started to wake up to the realities of what's actually happening. And I wasn't asleep like I was when I had my first child. And I knew that there was such a love for my first child, a love that I could have never imagined if I hadn't experienced it. But there was a love there that made me consider having more children because of the world that I saw out there. And that's a troubling thought. And it's one that I think we need to start having talks about, because if that's where we're at, not good. Not good at all. You know, I try to be optimistic. I try to think about, well, what could possibly change that would lead them to changing their opinion on, a topic as big as this. And the only thing that I can look out there and see that's a potential is that maybe when the boomers in that old way, because it's all, in my opinion, a lot of it's tied up and associated with that generation, and maybe even mine, but it's my hope, it's my opinion that when these generations are out of the picture, that what will rise up out of the ashes of that will be a new way of life, a new world, a new system.
I think it's largely dependent on several things, Tucker. It's the millennials, many of the millennials, and it's Gen Z. It's if the younger generations truly rise up and decide to get politically active, they could fully take over and take the power away from the baby boomer generation. The boomer generation is the generation that supports the current political industrial complex. They support it fully, Democrat and Republican. They're the ones that vote the most, they're the ones that donate the most, and they're the ones that remain glued to the television, to the propaganda news that they're fed every single day from the left and the right. However, I fully believe that it's the younger generations that can make the difference. And educating them, harnessing their power, and helping them understand that it's they who can take over and take control, then I think this country can be saved. And I'll say one more thing about the baby boomers. And I really attack the baby boomers a lot because I am angry about many of the things their generation has supported and done. I'm fully disgusted at baby boomers that hold on to power in Congress and in the Senate and many elected positions. Even our current president falls in that category. He'll probably never want to leave the White House, and I'm sure me saying that will make headlines. However, I think those baby boomers are the most dangerous, and they're completely responsible for our nearly $40 trillion in debt. The fact that Social Security will be completely insolvent in just 6 to 7 years. And the very fact that young Americans have it much harder because our dollar is so weak. Tragically, it may require the baby boomer generation passing away before Gen Z and even millennials can fully get involved and work hard to take it back.
Because they look out into that and they see the problems with it and they want no part of it. And that's why they don't want to bring other life into it. And so hopefully they'll be smart enough to not follow the same paths as these other generations and to continue on with these same things. Because, I mean, you've heard the saying, I think it was Einstein's quote, you can't do the same thing over and over and expect a different result. That is the very definition of stupidity or idiocracy or whatever it was. I don't know. But you get the point. And that's true. So if they look out there and want change and they desire change, well, then they have to be that change. They're going to have to be that change. And I mean, that's it. That's the last hope. That's all I see. Last straw. That with the death of that generation, the boomers, and once that system is out of the way, that all the ugliness that we're experiencing right now will die right along with it. That's my optimism, speaking through. Now let me tell you the other side of this. It's not necessarily their fault that it's this way, that generation, because there's an evil that exists underneath the surface of all of that. And that evil isn't going to die when they do. And so my concern on the pessimistic side of this is that due to the rise in technology and things that are coming down the pipe here, that all it's going to take is for these younger generations to have not so good intentions, and it could look very ugly from there because of AI and just all the technological advances. I mean, look at what's going on. And so, yeah, I mean, it could be beautiful or it could be the end. Because that's what we're talking about here, the end. If we're talking about an issue with people procreating, people having children, well, I mean, obviously at some point the scales are going to get tipped. And when there is an imbalance in nature, bad stuff happens because it wasn't designed that way. Clearly, it was designed for life to thrive. But because of these systems, we've done it. Mankind has wrecked everything. Yeah, there's a lot of good in the world. We've done a lot of good things, but the power structure at the top, where all the control comes from and where all the main decisions are made, yeah, not so good there. Sorry to say. And so this is a big issue. This is a very, very big issue that we really should be talking about, because when they are the whispers that you're hearing out there, well, I submit to you that it's the biggest problem facing humanity at this point. And so we better start taking it seriously. And, if you think this isn't what's being said by these younger generations, well, here, just have a look.
At a certain point in most people's lives, they'll ask themselves the question, should we have children? There is a group of people who have an easy answer for you, regardless of your life circumstance. No, don't. In fact, they say it is your moral responsibility not to bring new life into this world.
If I don't love this world that much, how can I bring a child into this world? Sometimes all the issues will get me thinking, why do I have to be brought to this world? What if my child asks me that question? How am I gonna answer that question?
Do you ever wish you were never born? No, really. Think. Have you ever just sat down and thought, why did my parents think it was a good idea to bring me here? Ever hear somebody say, life is good? Or better yet, anybody ever tell you that you should be grateful to be alive? The question is life really good? I would argue no.
This is, in my view, I question to myself, how do people want to have kids in today's world? Like, think about how hard life is, just not even having a kid just yet, let's say. You got to work, whether you have a kid or not, obviously, because you got to make that dough.
Master plan to fix declining birth rates. Ignore every single issue that is impacting birth rates. Hand women a baby bonus so small it wouldn't even cover 2 weeks of expenses. Pretend daycare doesn't cost more than rent. Okay, so let's start with the basics. When people talk about declining birth rates, they're usually talking about the fertility rate, which is essentially how many children the average woman has during her lifespan. To keep the population stable, that number needs to sit around 2.1 per woman. Right now, about 3/4 of countries worldwide are already below that level, which means yes, populations are shrinking. But here's the part that government governments actually care about. Fewer babies means fewer workers, which means fewer taxpayers, and also fewer consumers. Translation, it's GDP panic. But here's the thing, GDP doesn't actually measure whether or not people are thriving and happy. It doesn't track happiness, it doesn't track health, it doesn't track quality of life at all. And that's why a country like the US can flex the world's largest GDP, while also being one of the most unhealthy and unhappy developed nations, with lower life expectancy, higher maternal mortality, higher rates of chronic illness, and some of the worst mental health statistics in the industrialized world. Meanwhile, places like Denmark and New Zealand and Finland consistently rank as some of the most healthy and the most happy and most family friendly, despite having much smaller economies and a much smaller GDP. And that's really the lens that like most politicians look through. Not are families happy, and not do people want kids and why don't people want kids. The question is always, how do we keep the labor machine running so that we can stay rich? Instead of managing the economy to benefit the population, they try to manage the population to benefit the economy. Wrong priorities, babe.
So I often get asked, which is an odd thing to ask a futurist, should I bring a kid into this world? I mean, look at all the problems right now. It makes the most sense, either ethically or from a climate change perspective, not to do it. Things are really bad right now in a moment-to-moment level, be it climate change, be it race or economic justice, and a host of other issues.
Because of artificial intelligence?
No, it's bigger than artificial intelligence, Stephen. We all know that. I mean, there has never been such a perfect storm in the history of humanity. Economic, geopolitical, global warming, or climate change. You know, the whole idea of artificial intelligence, and many more. This is a perfect storm. This is the depth of uncertainty. The depth of uncertainty. It's never been more, in a video gamer's term, it's never been more intense. This is it, okay? And when you put all of that together, if you really love your kids, would you want to expose them to all of this? A couple of years, why not?
Today, we are dealing with expensive homes, overconsumption of disposable consumer junk, and jobs that are extremely insecure.
Childcare is now more expensive than rent for working families and is costing the economy more than $122 billion a year.
Their childcare expenses from their income taxes. That's a first.
What is the biggest thing that needs to change here in South Korea to make this more appealing for women?
Starting next year, South Korea will pay a childcare allowance of around $530 to parents with newborns.
The biggest issue in 20 years will be population collapse. Not explosion, collapse.
So yeah, might not be everybody saying it, but when a big portion of your society is saying they don't want to have children because they don't want to bring them into this world, well then there's a problem with that. And maybe we should start to try to do some things to change it. I don't know. Maybe that's just a crazy thought. But when the world is so ugly out there that people don't want to have children, the most beautiful thing that you can ever experience in this life, when they don't want to experience that because of it doesn't outweigh the ugliness, well then we are in a bad, bad place. I mean, come on. What else do we need to see here? When are we going to change things? When are we going to do something about this? And it's a hard topic. I get it. It's not one people like to face, but I'm sorry. Naivety and disillusion, there's no place for it in this conversation. So we better get real, and we better get real quick with this topic, because it's a serious one. Yeah. Hopefully things will change. Hopefully we can turn things around here. But what I do know is each one of us play a part in that. And if you are seeing these things, if you're seeing the injustices in the world, you're seeing the ugliness, and you're not using your voice to call it out, well, then nothing's ever going to change, because it starts there. It starts pointing at it and saying, evil, evil, evil. And when we start to shine the light on the darkness, well, you know what happens. You just crack a door a little bit in a dark room, what happens? That darkness flees the light. And so we need to start calling out that darkness. We all have that voice. We better start using it, or things could take a really ugly, drastic turn here real quick. That's all I got. Anyway, I'm Brad Casper. That's my spiel. This is Casper's Corner. If you haven't yet, subscribe. We're out.